All right, so firstly, I wanted to thank Marco and all the organizing team for the invitation. Always great to come to such great events. I appreciate all the effort that goes into organizing an event like this, and I would never be able to do it myself, so grateful to have people like that who make these events for the community. Thank you all for coming. And also thank you to Eduardo. It's been an absolute pleasure working together over the last few years. Basically, I can say anything stupid, I can have any crazy idea, and I know he's going to be there to tell the client, don't worry, what Nick really means is this, or something like that. So, and that's going to be what we're going to talk about today, just some of the things we've been working on, some of our experiences. So if you're looking for an explanation of the difference between a bounded context and a subdomain, you'll have to ask Kenny, who's sitting at the back over here, because we're not going to be talking about that stuff. So, I guess our experiences touched on different companies in different stages of their modernization journeys. We'll be covering a number of these aspects in the talk. Maybe you could just give a quick teaser, like what are the main things that are involved if you're going to be an architecture modernization facilitator?
Yeah, so the most important aspects are to eat very good food every day that you are with your clients. Always look for good food so that you are nourished and you can think how you will survive the next day, and you will make sure that things will go well, you plan well the next day.
Yeah. I put on a bit of weight working with Eduardo, definitely.
Me too.
But we had a lot of good food. But okay, so being serious, we have good food. It's always involved in these modernization journeys.
Good dishes.
What if people are thinking like, I want to do this architecture modernization facilitator role myself, or they're doing it and wondering how can I be more effective? What's something else that they would need to be aware of? What else is an important part?
Yeah. You can't skip desserts. Always get the best dessert on the menu.
And the best dessert is?
For myself, is this one on the top right. A vegetarian dessert we had in Copenhagen, amazing. But Nick, it's a churros guy. So Nick was always, if we were able to get churros, Nick would be going for that.
Always work with someone who knows your favorite desserts. That is one of the defining qualities I look for in any colleague. Okay, let's be serious now. What's really important in this role?
Yeah. So the important thing is finishing the night with some good digestives, so that you then can approach the next day with sleep well. Because if you eat those sorts of dishes, you need to have a good digestive to finish the night and prepare the next day.
So food, desserts, and drinks.
Yeah.
This talk is going to be about those three things.
What comes after that, right? So this is a bit of a context setting, but that's all true. So we spend a lot of time over those dinners thinking about how can we help our customers on the next day when we go and have another workshop with them on helping them getting through those modernization journeys. And Nick, maybe you can tell us a bit about that.
Yeah, so one of the main topics is kickstarting, always a very interesting aspect. Clients at the start of their journey, how to get something started in the right way, how to make those initial choices. And also, as you move through the journey, how to keep your modernization on the right tracks. There's always a lot of competing pressures. And in all of our experiences, there's always been a lot of DDD involved, a lot of DDD techniques and ideas. But certainly, DDD is not enough. There's a lot of other skills involved as well, right?
Definitely. Yeah, so, many other things. And we will get into that in a second. But first, I wanted to we will introduce ourselves a little bit. So my name is Eduardo Silva. I'm an independent consultant on the topics that we will be talking about today, which is a bit about socio-technical systems, architecture, and leadership evolution and modernization. And so this is just more than just DDD and the technical architecture. There are many aspects that come into play here. And with me, I have Nick with a...
Yeah, so I've been in IT around 10, 15 years, mostly as a developer, then working as a consultant, always very interested in DDD. So yeah, a lot of the stuff I'm involved in touches on DDD. I'm also the co-organizer of DDD London Meetup. So if ever you're in London, you're welcome to come by. If ever you want to give a talk at one of our meetup events, always looking for speakers. Doesn't have to be advanced, doesn't have to be completely 100% DDD. It's open to a wide range of topics. If you've never done talks before, that's okay, so just get in touch. Be happy to talk to you. But not Vaughan. He's not allowed back anymore.
Point there. Yeah. So this is going to be the topics we will be talking about today. So in there we will share the slides afterwards, but Nick and I started trying to think when we think about the modernization, what are sort of the stages that organizations go through? So there will be some sort of realization, hey, we really need to do something here, and sometimes you don't know exactly how to start doing it, but some people will start realizing how we can start framing this. And what we will be talking about today is more this, how do we actually get started on doing those things? And then it's not just about start, but it's about to actually execute, actually start doing things day in, day out. And last but not the least, if we have the time, because we have a lot of slides, we may get into how do you keep up the momentum on doing those things? How do you keep up the momentum on doing those things over just going back to the usual things that you typically have to do? The pressure of delivering the next feature and not necessarily modernizing. So this is sort of our map for today. Nick, but before we get into actually doing this, and given that you wrote a book called Architecture Modernization, maybe you can share with us all, what do we mean by architecture?
Yeah, what do we mean by modernization? Well, sometimes people look for a very strict definition, and they're asking questions like, is this thing my company's doing modernization or not? It's not always really that useful to have a strict definition. I think really, I like this idea at the bottom here. I don't know where I stole this quote from. Might be someone here actually, if you own that quote, let me know. But basically, modernization is where you have an architecture, some legacy, and it's stopping your business doing things. Things are just not possible. Or maybe things are too expensive, so they're practically impossible. And so by investing in your legacy system, and applying modernized principles and patterns, your business can do things that it currently can't do. I think that's really the basic idea. Would you like to add anything else to that, or make it a bit more concrete, maybe?
Yeah, so maybe I would add that this is not just a technical thing. So we will come into that, but I would like to reiterate already from here that this is more than a technical thing. It will involve our teams, it will involve how we think about our business, and it should be business-driven. And I think if we start doing that, we will avoid many of the challenges that people have around modernization. Yeah. Yeah, so, yeah, building up on that idea. So these are some quotes from clients that we have. So what are some of the typical things that clients approach us with? So it's difficult to evolve existing products or create new ones. So we can't move anymore. It takes us forever to do that. Some other flavors are we have built our core proposition on an unreliable third-party platform. So your core domain models on someone else's platform, and you can't change anything. So you are building something on your side, trying to compensate what that thing is failing. Yeah, and the one more here to the right, it's a classic, right? So every time we need to make a little change, we need to talk with 10 teams. Yeah, but again, reiterating, modernization is about allowing to address those things that are blocking us from actually achieving business value. And this will, again, involve many other things. It's not just a technical thing.
Okay, so we'll get into some details now, share some more concrete examples, but just a very quick question that always comes up, and maybe some of you already have this, and people are always asking, but shouldn't modernization be an ongoing thing? You shouldn't need to have these big 2 or 3 year projects, or maybe even longer. And I always say yes, if you continuously invest in your architecture, you don't need to have these multi-year projects. I'm not saying you need to have these multi-year projects. You're not, well, not you people, but a lot of people just aren't investing continuously. So yes, ideally, it should be an ongoing thing, but for most companies that don't continuously evolve their systems, you're in a situation where you have to have a bigger upfront investment. So let's move on. Let's talk about something more concrete.
Yeah, so kickstarting a modernization. That was the first topic we were talking about. And I would like to invite Nick to share some stories. How do we typically start this? So as facilitators of architecture modernization.
Hello, is that Eduardo?
Yeah.
Hey, Eduardo, I've seen some of your videos on YouTube. I think we might need a bit of your help, mate.
Okay, just tell me a bit more of what's going on.
So basically, I just got this new job as a CTO, and I've identified some challenges in the company, and basically, they spent a whole year building this generic platform. They're currently the market leaders in this one vertical, and the leadership were talking about maybe expanding in a few years. And so the previous CTO said, we're going to build this generic platform that can support all possible future use cases. He got fired. They've delivered nothing in 1 year, and I'm here to pick up the pieces. So you can help me, right?
I don't know. We should have a coffee. But tell me a bit more. What's going on? What other problems do you have? It's that the only. This is a big problem. They seem they had a lot of fun building a very generic platform.
The product managers and developers hate each other. They don't really talk to each other. There's a lot of politics. We have 5 different tech stacks, and I think we're implementing the 6th one now. Do you get the idea, or should I carry on?
Yeah, I think we need to have that coffee.
Okay, let's have a coffee.
Yeah, let's have a coffee. This is obviously, as in the movies, adapted from a real story, and what you see here is a bit of what Nick and I, after having some of these calls, we started seeing, and experimenting with some clients, we started seeing sort of these 3 phases of our engagements when approaching architecture modernization. So, and this is, we are going to go through them in detail in the next slides, but I just wanted to give you a feeling of what are the typical things that we go through. So we start by listening. We go in and we listen. We don't emit opinions on what's good and bad. We don't provide solutions. We just listen. And the goal is really to understand what's going on. We do this with many people. We will get into the details. But then what we typically do on this second part here is to bring a lot of people together in one location and spend a few days together to actually go through the learnings we had on those sessions and try to start seeing, okay, how could we explore some options to start moving out of this mess. And finally, the last part there, the 3, we call it ongoing enablement. And this is what a facilitator of an architecture modernization would be doing once we start actually moving. So things will be very difficult on that phase 3. It's not 1 and 2 is not where the magic happens. 3 is when the things start actually happening, and there we need also to help and see how we can facilitate the organization to get through that. So, Nick, maybe you can tell us a bit more about this first phase, the listening.
Yeah, so I think you were making some good points there. Really, there's different skills that are needed. And if you're facilitating modernization, definitely requires a lot of different mindsets, a lot of different skills, a lot of support from the people who are around you who know your favorite desserts as you go through these different phases. And it's not really a linear process. It's lots of small loops, but something that we found very effective, something that we've done, I think nearly in all cases, is we like to start by listening, right? We try to not have any opinions at the start, and even when people tell us things, we try to hold opinions, and we'll talk to a mixture of people, different teams, different skills. Might be the CFO, speaking to a CFO once who was explaining, I don't understand all these microservices things the developers are talking about, and I don't know if I should approve the budget or not. So you can end up in all kinds of conversations like that, and it's just good to listen and understand how different people feel about things across the organization.
Yeah. So, yeah, and so on this part, it's really one of the key aspects also for us, particularly for us as external facilitators coming into an organization, was also to build some relationships with the people that are there. So they don't know us from anywhere, so we sort of come in and we try to start creating a relationship with them. But then here are some tips that we tend to follow here. On these sessions, we don't go in with a very structured program, like, oh, first you answer this question, always the same questions. They tend to be rather organic, actually. So we try to ask open questions, and we obviously sometimes are talking with operations people, so we have some idea that we are going to be talking about operations, so we may throw some questions around that. Some people from sales, maybe it's slightly different, but we try to basically capture what are the main challenges that are blocking them around the modernization topic that we are coming in, or as a facilitator that you are trying to help facilitate. These sessions we tend to, in our case, we did mostly remote sessions, and we always made sure that it was not like just 20 minutes and try to get through a lot of things. Make sure you have enough time to actually go and talk about things and be able to go on side explorations and see what makes sense and not. And here at the bottom, you cannot read anything, but so this is what we would, for example, present on the next phase. So Nick and I went and listened to many different people, and then we start seeing some hotspots, like things that everyone is complaining about, or something that is happening in one part and the other part has no idea that this is happening. This is very common. Yeah. Nick, what happens sometimes when we share these learnings with people in the organization?
Well, quite a few things happen, actually. I'll talk about this one shortly, but I was thinking about a few things as you were talking there. One of the things, sometimes it can be difficult. It was difficult for me when you start having to have these unstructured conversations with people from all around the organization. You know, if you're coming from a developer background, it's actually not that easy. One of the tricks I learned was you can start a conversation with, like, what's your favorite dessert? That can unlock a lot of interesting conversations, and then you can gradually get onto the topic of work after that. And I started to notice over time, the attitudes people have towards you. Sometimes people are like trying to tell you this perfect vision because they think you're here to judge them or get them fired. And sometimes people are at the opposite side, and they're like telling you everything because they're like, oh, finally, someone's here to fix all of our problems, just going to throw everything at this person, and hopefully this time I won't have to use this 100-sheet Excel sheet thing for the next 10 years, finally get rid of it. But in this example here, this was a very interesting one, because often when you're kicking things off, you have to make a choice about where you start. You're not going to start modernizing everything all at once. And people can have different opinions about that. And as you go through these listening sessions, people start to realize there are things about their own company they didn't realize. People might be convinced that, here, we need to start in domain A, but then this person starts asking, oh, maybe we should start in domain B or domain C. Maybe these would be good starting points. They will be more valuable here. So we get into a situation where the listening sessions can sometimes bring up lots of information.
Yep.
They can bring up lots of information, and this can actually cause a bit of stress, right? People thought they were going to have this very clear modernization plan. We've done these listening sessions and presented ideas, and now they're like, these guys have blown our brains. How are we going to get through a situation like this, Eduardo? If you're a facilitator and you've done this listening session, and now all these ideas are flowing, how do you manage this yourself when there's this anxiety, and how do you help these people to get through the situation? What's going on through your mind?
Yeah. This is, it happens a lot, particularly at the start when everyone has many things on their brains and didn't actually start comparing things and looking at them on a more, with some more clarity. So what we tend to do on this phase is to try to make those things very explicit, and also get people to think that we cannot stay on this with no decision forever. So we better take a decision. It may not be the best, but it is probably going to help us to make progress. And this is very difficult for many people because we want certainty. We want to be sure, this is the best that we could ever take, but we just don't know. But this is a very tricky thing. So in order for us to navigate a bit of this, what we did a few times, because sometimes it was clear people were, okay, this is it. We organized something that we call decision-making sessions or workshops. And the very interesting thing is that in all of the workshops we did, is that all of that confusion, once we put things down and we just start seeing them, the options sort of side by side, you see there on the right, we tried to see where everyone thinks we should be starting, and everyone agreed that we should start on that domain, for example. So by just having these simple workshops together, making things a bit more explicit and just start seeing them, people just agreed, okay, this is where we should be going, and so that confusion was more of like something that we create on our minds than anything else, right?
And what are you thinking at this point? Because you're here to help them make this decision, and there's lots of confusion and doubt and panic. Like, are you panicking inside, or are you calm and you feel like everything's going to work out fine?
You never panic, I know, but I was panicking inside a few times. No, we obviously are panicking a bit sometimes. We are humans. But we are really focused on one of the key things that we started seeing is that our focus is keeping things moving. As facilitators, we need to keep things moving. And in this case, in some clients, we didn't need to do this. In some cases, we just created these. These are sort of custom-made. Nick and I sit down and start seeing, okay, what we think this group of people would sort of resonate with as a means to start going for a decision. So we already know them a bit, and we bring these things, and this tends to work rather effectively.
Yeah, so in this example, as he showed on the previous slide, I think the first thing we did to bring some clarity and some focus and to reduce the calmness was we agreed that they had to make a decision by a certain date because other people in the organization were expecting to see some changes. So we already knew they had to make a decision. And as we went through the process Eduardo was talking about, we had that decision date in the calendar. We knew the options. We had workshops discussing each of the options. And then when we came to decision-making workshop, they were all magically aligned. And so I think this is something that's happened a few times to us, right? And I think as a facilitator, you just have to trust the process. If you have a good process for analyzing the options and making a decision, you can be panicking still, because they might not make a decision, but you can be confident that by going through this process, even people that seem completely lost will be aligned and able to make a decision. So, yeah, it's okay to panic, but have some trust in the process. So, we've done these listening and mapping sessions. We've uncovered lots of ideas. We've analyzed some options. We've gone through this phase of trying to pick a decision for a starting point in this kickstarting phase. And then we ended up doing a bunch of these Kickstarter workshops. We didn't really have a name at first, but we started calling them Kickstarter workshops. So let's talk a bit about these. So in this image, this was in Canada, I think, last year. I'm not sure what we'd eaten or drank the night before. That might have been when we went to the Brazilian Radicchio that day. That was a pretty good one. If you're looking for a good Brazilian Radicchio in Toronto, I can definitely recommend you somewhere good. So this is a Kickstarter workshop. Day one is mostly around discovery. Since you're in this picture, would you like to tell them a bit about what's just happened and what you're thinking at this point?
I don't know what I was thinking, but no, I was. So this, first of all, this was one of the best places I ever did a workshop. We had the opportunity to. They were not able to find a location, and suddenly the building had the whole up floor of a huge office building available for us. So we
did have a bit of a paint smell. There was still fresh paint. That was a bit of a drawback.
It was worth. It was worth. And what is happening here is so Nick and I, we had 60 people working with us on this workshop. So this was the company decided, okay, we want to modernize. We want to get people together because some of them never saw each other before. So they wanted to do multiple things. They wanted to get people excited to do this. So this was probably one of the best experiences on doing big picture event storming. Somehow we got really all the experts, as Alberto recommends. The experts were there, sales and marketing, operations, product, all of these different perspectives were there. And people were just extremely engaged. And so we were planning to have like a day and something to map out things, but at the end of the afternoon of the day one, we had mapped out basically a lot of their processes. It was amazing, an amazing experience, and everyone was extremely excited.
We actually had 3 groups. I worked with 2 groups, and he worked with this group. The groups I worked out with didn't do so well, but because his group went so amazing, people forgot about the groups I worked with. So that's another example of how he saved me.
Yeah, another one. Yeah, we need to count that to give him point. Yeah, but so zooming up. So this was the first day, but just to give you an idea, and you probably cannot read everything, but just to tell you an idea, typically the agendas of these workshops, when we go in, they tend to look a bit like this. The first yellow stick you see there on top, we always start with bringing in context of the business. Like, what are we doing? What are the important things that we are doing as a business? This is extremely important, and we always did this. I don't think we would vary the other parts, but this was always the start.
We started doing that 3 questions thing, right? Where we tried to ask like one of the key decision makers or the key leaders in this area, what are the 3 questions that we need to answer in this workshop? And we would emphasize this at the start as part of the bigger product vision. And then as we went through the workshop, we go through these different activities over 3, 4, 5 days, we could always come back to those 3 questions and say, are we making progress towards this? And remind people that, we're deep in the details of some part of your legacy system, but still, remember on day 1, here's why we're here.
Yeah. Typically, second thing that we tend to do is just sort of a big picture event storming and get people, as I was just talking about, to start seeing where are we, right? Bringing all of the different perspectives, a lot of insights. So this particular picture here, there were so many learnings. People had no clue what sales and marketing was doing in almost half of the wall, the first part. People had no clue what they were doing. This was eye-opening for everyone, including the CTO that was there. He was new. He had no clue that all those things were happening, and the teams neither. So that tends to be like the second, tends to be, say, first day, sometimes part of the second day. And then after that, we want to start focusing on some parts and exploring options. So, okay, cool, we start seeing the bigger picture, this is what we have. We start maybe seeing some candidates for possible subdomains, whatever. And now we want to start looking at the details of some options. And the last part, that's always one thing that we also have in the agenda, which is we don't want to leave this room without some clues of what are we doing next. What are we doing on the next 3 to 6 months? So what can we start seeing? Obviously, this will not be precise, but we want all of these 60 people to feel that we are doing something. And just the black sticky, Nick, this always changes. So we share this, but it always changes.
Yeah, so there's always a lot of panic involved in these workshops as well, as things change for different reasons. Maybe the CEO turns up and he starts talking about something different, or some discoveries on day 1 affect what's happening on day 2. And I think it's the same kind of situation. We project, like, don't worry, we've designed this, we're ready for flexibilities, but inside we're like panicking, right? Like, this is like these Kickstarter workshop weeks, you're like 100% switched on.
Yeah.
And we're having all that good food, we're talking about, should we do this the next day? Should we do that? Normally it's me saying crazy stuff and he's saying, no, let's not do that. And even in the mornings, we meet for a coffee at the cafe, we're walking to the venue and we're like, we're going to be doing this workshop in 20 minutes and we're still not sure if we do this or this. So, but it's you have to have a plan, but be constantly thinking, should we change something here?
Yeah. Don't stick to the plan just because you had a plan. So what we try to do is to continuously see what would make the most impact if we explore something else. And also, this is very important. If you are starting to do this with people that are just seeing this for the first time, they should have a clue of what are we doing here. So if they start seeing what's our idea of what we are going to do on these 3 to 4 days, it's also calming for them, right? So we know what we are.
Yeah, they want to feel like it's being organized and their time's being used effectively, and there's some kind of structure to what's going through, and you just have to make them feel that there is, even if it's a bit flexible underneath.
Yeah, and we share a lot of pre-read materials together with the agenda, so people come in already with some context of what are we coming in and what we expect. Also, people to have certain attitude during the workshop to participate, etc.
How are we doing for time, by the way? Do we have to speed up or go at this speed?
We will not finish, Nick.
Okay, let's see how far we can get. So I think we talked a bit about the day 1 already, starting with a strong business vision, having those clarities about what we want to achieve in the workshop and modernization overall, doing some big picture. Day 1, it's normally quite similar around vision and discovery. Yeah. So I think we talked about this already. Maybe let's move on to what happens after day 1. Yeah. And this is what we talked about earlier. I think we got into this pattern, right, where we try and organize a social activity after the first day. Not before the first day, not after the second day, but I think in the evening of the first day, could be just going to a restaurant. Sometimes clients take us bowling and stuff. But I think what we noticed is by doing something social after the first day, people have the whole first day to talk about. They've learned some stuff, and it's a chance to reflect on those ideas and then get more excited for the following day. So I think after day 1's perfect timing. I really feel strongly about that one. Yeah. Yeah. If you want to do social activities more than that, okay, but if you only have one chance, because people might be flying in or might not be available for all the evenings, if you only have one evening, try and make it the first evening. I think that gives a good balance of reflecting on the first day, being a bit more creative, juices flowing for the following days. Obviously, you don't want people to drink too much after the first day. You got to be facilitating even in the evening sessions. Like I said, 100% switched on. This is not a holiday. Yeah. So, what things can happen in the evening, right? What if you find yourself in this situation?
So after 2 beers, some people have these brilliant ideas, and this is an example. So we had this great exploration, and then we had these 3 groups, the 3 groups that we just talked about, and then the CTO came to us on that evening social activity and said, okay, why don't we, instead of focusing on that domain that we were looking for, why don't we explore 3? We parallelized the exploration. What did we do, Nick? Do you remember?
In this example, I think we had to calm him down a bit, right?
Yeah, we had to, yeah. But we still accepted to go for the 3 domains. But what we said was, let's explore. So one of the groups, the group that was more, that had, say, the clear exploration, went for the domain that we were prioritizing. But the other 2 groups, there were indeed 2 domains that we could go deeper, and this is what we ended up having to adapt that night and the early morning of the next day to get into day 2.
And he also proposed the other thing, right? He said, so you get ideas from the clients you're working with. Sometimes they're good ideas, and sometimes not. You have to keep an open mind. But in this example, he also said about, could you do something nice? He said, before you trash everything about the current system, could you try and find a moment to say something nice? And so we did this thing, I think it was on the 4th day, where we just said, each person comes up to the front of the room, and they have a green sticky, and they write one thing on the wall that they want to keep about the current system. And we weren't planning to do that. It was his idea. It worked amazingly well, right? They were all coming up. Some of the things I probably wouldn't have kept, but it's important to understand what people think is worth keeping. Had all kinds of things around ways of working, CI pipelines, certain tech stacks. So yeah, in the evenings, some ideas are a bit wild and you have to calm them down a bit like you did. But that one, we took it and ran with it. And it was one of the best moments of the week. So yeah, I think as a facilitator, you don't have to have all the ideas yourself and work with the content other people give you. Anyways, day 2 and day 3, as we talked about, as we touched on, really want to start getting more into details here. Day 1's been about discovery. Day 2 and day 3, we're trying to start to design this future architecture. We might use techniques like design level event storming around the future states. Other techniques, we might use things like C4, but really trying to move people forward. And I think in these examples, as a facilitator, people have been working in legacy a lot, right? And when you start asking them to design a whole new version of the domain they're working in, there's a lot of, they're not sure what to do or how to do this, even when you present these techniques. So I think as a facilitator, having some tricks. So one thing that I like to do personally, when I see a group that's struggling, is maybe to say like, okay, let's think about this new process you're designing. What might be a starting point and what might be the end point? And how can we get from here to here? Well, we could publish an event, make an API call, and suddenly people start putting things together. So those are like my tricks. Any ones you would like to add?
I think one of an interesting story on this client we are talking is also to have also here a good mix of people. So, for example, in some of the solutions that came up were there was a great dynamic between a product manager and a software engineer that never spoke with each other before. So when we started solutioning, they came up with the most amazing options that they would not have seen if they would do this in isolation. So this was also a reiteration on why it's important to have mixed groups.
Yeah, this was a good one, I think. This was one of the companies where the products and developers not hate each other, it wasn't that bad, but had very siloed ways of working. And in one of the activities on day 2, they were designing this future process. And I had to ask one person, are you a product manager or a developer? Because you seem to be doing both things really well. And she just said, oh no, I'm a developer. So it's just amazing when you give people a chance to collaborate with other people and take on tasks they wouldn't normally do, how skilled they are and how they enjoy doing those things. And I think probably that was one of the things you touched on earlier, right? When they were saying like, we've never worked this way before. Yep. This is like a totally different way of working. These workshops can unlock that. And I think that's also big for modernization because people might have a lot of doubts about modernization, if it will be effective, if management will support it, but you do a workshop like this, oh, we've never worked this way before. Maybe this modernization thing might actually work. Starting to have some doubts that we might actually do something good here. Anyways, let's continue. So we're now on day 4, day 5. We've got some designs and solutions, things that we could almost start to implement. Where do we go from here?
Yeah, so this is what I mentioned earlier. So this would be our last day. And here we we looked at the options, and now we spend a good amount of time on trying to see, okay, if you would have infinite money, what would you do next week or in the next 3 to 6 months? Obviously, the infinite money is not possible, but this is very important, and was a learning that we came to, which a lot of people are so worried about money that they cannot see an option in front of them. And even we use the technique, remember, Nick, of people were so worried during the first days that we started this day by asking a CTO to come in and talk with everyone and make sure that people shouldn't be thinking about, like, oh, we should not spend the money, we should. So the CTO came in. And
I think as a facilitator, on one hand, we have these CTOs and CEOs who are saying we want to modernize, invest, expand into new countries, do all this stuff, and they're willing to invest a lot of money. And then we do the workshop with the developers, and they're just used to working the legacy, having to work on a very small budget, make small, safe changes. And it's really hard for them to think about how to modernize when they've been used to working that way for such a long time. And they'll say things like, oh yeah, if we had one more developer, we could go a little bit faster, or a lot of worries, or they're just not even in the same level of thinking when it comes to budgets, right? And so, yeah, these kind of questions like, imagine you have unlimited budget, how would you modernize the system? And even still, they're like, well, if we had a couple more people, they're just not thinking on the same level. So yeah, questions like that are super useful.
Yeah. So that's what typically we do here. We try to visualize what would be sort of things, could be also just having some more workshops to go deeper into certain things, or we need more people, or we need to start looking at that monolith and do something there. So we want to start seeing what are those options, because then this allows us to start planning what are we doing next.
But I think there is something also valid here, because these people currently work in these legacy systems and they have to support it. And as a facilitator, you might be encouraging them to do all this adventurous modernization. But if things go wrong, and as you're migrating from your legacy to your current system, things often do break. So I think it's trying to get these people to be more ambitious in terms of how they could modernize, but also respecting that they have to support these systems, and if things go wrong, they will have to deal with the consequences.
Yeah. Okay. Here are just some feedback we get on these workshops. Nick, do you want to go over a few?
Which one would I pick here? I think the sales and marketing one is always interesting, where they found that 80-step manual process that no one knew about. And probably around the ways of working, like we talked about, where it's just a different way of working. And that, if you're coming in as a CTO into a new company and you're trying to turn the ship around from what's been done before, having these workshops where people work in a different way can make them feel like, oh yeah, this new CTO, this new leader who's come in is going to help us to be working in a more effective or a more interesting way. Yeah. Maybe I think you could talk about this one as well. I think the bottom right one, since you're still working on that.
Yeah, this was an interesting one. So it says total chaos, and then at the end it makes sense. And it was interesting. I then was talking with a person, and she was this is a chaotic journey. So you start very chaotic, and you start seeing options, and you start seeing what can we do next. So this was a good, I think, summary of our goal of doing these workshops, and that was very interesting feedback we got. We have 8 minutes left, so I think we will go a bit faster on some parts to just get a feeling for what comes after.
Yeah, sure.
Right?
So we talked about the initial phase where you're listening and learning about what's happening in the company. We talked about making a choice about where to start and some Kickstarter workshops. Hopefully things are progressing at this point. And now we're at the stage where it's time to start actually doing modernization work. So what are some of the things that you encounter as a facilitator at this stage of the journey?
Yeah, so you can have, we get multiple reactions after this, right? So we are still doing, we just had these workshops, right? So people are not yet seeing things happening. So for example, you can have the typical skeptical chief architect that says, oh, yeah, those were very nice workshops, but yeah, But we still have this, we need to deliver this. And so we will still implement this new feature in our Trond legacy system. And and this happens quite a lot.
Let's have another example. The exasperated head of engineering. So sometimes we're getting involved in modernization later into the journey when companies have already started. And in this example here, I was talking to this head of engineering, and he said, talking about the 25 microservices they built over the last couple of years, but he was exasperated that the leadership wasn't giving the dev teams any more time and effort to modernize because they'd had enough over the last couple of years, and they were stuck in a situation where they still had the big old legacy database, and all of their microservices were still talking to this database. So during the execution phase, things can go wrong, and maybe we can dig into why these things go wrong.
Yeah. So this is so what we notice is that typically things go wrong because the organization is at a certain level of what we like to call architecture capability. Right, so the way they approach, for example, domain-driven design, the way they leverage that, or some other techniques, or what actually they need to modernize more effectively. So there is a gap to that capability in the organization. And this is something that Nick and I have been thinking and talking a lot about. And I think Nick will tell us a bit about what we think could be a way for us to navigate this.
Yeah, I think in general, if you're just expecting all of the teams to start modernizing the bits of the system they're working on without addressing these capability gaps, you're going to end up in those situations where you've gone in the wrong direction, made some bad choices. So you need to think about how do we introduce some support or enablement in the company to address these gaps, to help teams modernize effectively. One of the patterns that we've seen a lot is the AMET, the Architecture Modernization Enabling Team. It's a group of people whose job is to identify what's slowing modernization down and to address these issues. It's not to do the work yourself. It's not to tell other people what to do. It's to empower other people to do this work, to make sure that teams, you can step away from the teams and they can carry on modernizing how you want them to. The AMET's one approach. You might have an architecture community, you might form virtual teams, but you need to think about what are the support structures you'll put in place to address this gap and to support each team on that journey.
Yeah.
And maybe you could talk us about this example, how we set one up recently.
Yeah, so this is an example from a company that we worked with last year. I'm still working with them, actually. And so who should be there on that AMET? Who's this AMET, right? And typically it's people that will be able to help the teams facilitate things so that they can address that capability gap. So they know a lot about how can we navigate this modernization, how can we facilitate things. So on this case, what we did, even before those listening sessions, was these really seem like the people that should be on that team. With more people later, but there are already here 2 or 3 people that should be helping facilitating that. So they were with us already on the listening sessions. So they were listening with us, and they were getting the surprises also for getting that learning. And then they were with us on the Kickstarter workshop. So they were already doing that. And at the day after of the workshop, this was a very interesting session we had, which was, okay, now we learned quite a lot on this workshop. We start framing what we should be doing next. And this group started, so we sat down and we started having them to start driving what we would be doing next week. And part of our role as facilitators was to also get some rituals with them and keep on things happening, and this group finding time to do things. That's maybe something you can share a bit, Nick, the time of these people.
About the type of people in an AMET.
Yeah.
How long do we have left?
4
we have
minutes.
3 minutes. Okay, yeah, we're good. So
we'll wrap this up.
I think with this kind of team, the goal is that someone from an architecture modernization enabling team might be spending a lot of time with a team. You might be very hands-on. But I think what we think is effective is that when that person steps away, the team can continue to operate effectively. You've actually transferred the skills they need, supported them, and they're sufficient without you. So some of the things that might not work is, let's say, someone who does the work for the team, who designs the domain model for the team, someone who writes some code and says, okay, I've done it for you, take this and work with it. Someone who's probably a bit more patient, I think. I think there are definitely times where you can step forward and do the work with the team, maybe actually implement things with them and you're leading it, but the goal is you can step back and let them drive it. I think we've worked with AMETs that had like project management skills, delivery management skills in the team, because sometimes we work with these architects who are very architecturally skilled, but when it comes to thinking about how do we organize ourselves, how do we plan our time effectively, having those project management experts in the team can be useful. And I think with the AMET role, sometimes the issue is maybe unblocking things on a roadmap or a strategic level, sometimes being hands-on with the teams doing real work. So it requires a lot of skills. You don't need everyone in the team to have all those skills, but you need a mix in the team, right? Anything you would add to that?
I would add many things, but we have 3 minutes or 2 now. Yeah, but I think we will not get into that section. I want to go to the very end and just maybe we should just wrap up and give you some key takeaways, because we knew we had 2 more sections, so this will be for next year, opening keynote. So maybe I start with I pick one, Nick, and you pick another. One thing that people can understand architecture modernization very easily, but the key part, the most difficult part that we tend to see is actually to start and keep the momentum on this happening. There is always some other force attracting them to do something else, and this is one important thing to keep in mind.
Okay, I will probably pick the one in the middle. I think the be flexible is something that we really enjoyed, since we're not a big consultancy with our standardized PowerPoint decks where we do find and replace on the name of the client we're working with. We don't have to bring in all these people and go through a process. One of the benefits of the way we facilitate is that we can be very flexible, right? Like I was talking about, the night before, we're thinking like, what we're going to do the next day. You're telling me, no, Nick, we're not going to do that. And we're still thinking the morning before. I think that flexibility is really powerful as you can adapt to what's happening, incorporate new ideas. So I definitely enjoy that. I would encourage experimenting with that. Maybe it's not right for you. Maybe you prefer more structure. But at the same time, I think whilst you might be happy with the chaos, the people you're working with might not be. They might have a lot of priorities. So you somehow need to be flexible, but not make the other people think, these clowns are making it all up as they go along. I'm not buying any of this stuff. So yeah, I'm happy to share my thoughts on how to do that later. And I'm sure he'd be happy to tell you why you shouldn't listen to me when I talk about those things.
Cool.
Let you have the final word.
Well, I could go on and on, but I think the one you mentioned is extremely important, like meeting the people where they are, which would be that yellow sticky there. We need to see what works for people, and then I think this flexibility is more on how can we meet them where they are so that we can help them move than anything else. Yeah. And with that, I think we should close, Nick. But we do have, if you want to read more, we have a few articles on this, so feel free to check there or to ping us, I think. We have our contacts here. Yeah.
All good. Thank you.
Thank you.